Imagine with me just for a moment a freezer full of frozen meat. And that freezer is connected, of course, to an outlet. That's how it keeps going. And you know that just by looking at the freezer, if it comes unplugged from the power source, you aren't going to be able to tell whether or not that meat is defrosting. And we know that over time, however, if it's defrosted enough that it begins to rot and put off that odor, you're going to smell it, you're going to know even through the seal of the freezer. So we imagine for a second if we have a child, a toddler that regularly unplugs the freezer from the outlet, from the power source. As you might guess, I have a couple toddlers. But imagine for a moment what happens. Are you going to notice, say, over an hour, a day, a week, whether or not that freezer is unplugged just by looking at the freezer? Or are you going to check the power source? And how long are you going to wait before you check? Are you going to wait until you smell the stench of rotting meat before you check to make sure it's plugged in? No, you're going to check regularly. And likewise, our spines have the switch between our brain and our body by a bone slightly out of place that can block off the flow of nerve impulse, the power source of our brain to the tissue cells in our body. And if enough time goes by, what's going to happen to those poor tissue cells on the end of those damaged nerves? Well, we know that it won't go well for those tissue cells. They won't be as healthy as they would be otherwise. And many studies show this, it bears this out in research, whether it's looking at dogs' kidneys, where they cut a nerve going to a dog's kidney, or whether it's looking at various other organs or even just muscle tissue. It begins to atrophy, it begins to die. So how long are you going to wait before you actually get your spine checked if you know the importance of that connection, that vital connection between brain and body? Are you going to wait till you actually show symptoms? See, we understand that as much as 90% of the time, vertebral subluxations don't have symptoms. And you can't tell just by looking at a person whether or not they're subluxated. You actually have to check the spine. And that's what chiropractors specialize in and concern themselves with, is those regular vertebral subluxation checks to evaluate for a blockage to that nerve system. So make sure that you and your loved ones, just as I do, get your spines regularly checked for optimal nerve flow between brain and body, making sure that you release those health and healing messages from your brain to your tissue cells.